Okay, let's turn to UI elements. These elements are used more likely while building forms and other screens to collect information from a user. Submit forms, questionnaires, contact forms, tests, and so on. Uh, Many of you already familiar with these, but I think it will be useful to clarify their functions for a better future usage. So dropdown is a select text field where a user can select an option. In the past, this element was used only to pick one option, but recently it is also used to select several items from a list. Sometimes, of course, it isn't much convenient, but it may be helpful when working on small dimensions like smartphone. More than that, you are able to put not only text lines in the dropdown, but there may be icons, images, and so on. Some bullets, arrows. Please follow the logic when designing a dropdown. Don't forget descriptions at once. It should be clearly defined and affordable for a user to predict the action after a click, say use feed forward. Organize your information properly and avoid too option or too long lists, as well as long titles for available options. Sometimes it may be more useful to use checkboxes instead. Text field or text area is the element which communicates entering symbolic or numeric information. Nothing special here, but in some cases, like entering a card number information, the best practice is to divide the long numbers or IDs into 4 or 5 sections. Most software companies have been using this feature for a long time, especially in the serial number area. Later, online payment system picked up this feature and implemented it in their interfaces for customers' convenience. I would also suggest avoiding fancy styles in these, especially when we are talking about checkout on e-commerce, card, entering personal, legal, and financial or other sensitive information. All above should convey security, and so should do your design. Radio button. Radio buttons are used when only one option should be selected from a list. Please do not confuse it with the checkboxes, because second are used for multiple choice sections. Radio buttons, as well as the elements described before, should be intuitive. Usually selected radio button is a bright color circle with the center of a bigger circle of a neutral color. Non-selected radio buttons just neutral, say gray circle, sometimes with outline. Front-end developers don't like when designers are customizing default UI elements like this. It is sometimes unnecessary. Sometimes it helps to create a more consistent design. Please keep in mind that it's possible that initially none of the radio buttons in a group are selected. Checkboxes are like radio buttons, but they allow a multiple selection. Although it seems that putting these elements after their labels is more logical, because you take an action after you read the label. Most designers tend to use checkboxes and radio buttons before the element's name or label. This is because different lengths of names in some rows may create an unbalanced composition, so selecting needed items would be challenging. I tried once, it looked like a mess. Buttons. A few years ago, designers played with these elements that they wanted, creating problems for front-end developers using a huge number of Photoshop effects, shadows, um, texture, gradients, and so on. These elements um, was barely coded into CSS. Today, thank God and technology, we can mimic the majority effects from graphic software into CSS. So back to design. Buttons came in web design from hardware design. It's just as these old devices, web buttons symbolize an additional or separate layer on the surface of the website and specific action, usually link or operation. And the concept of website buttons used to emphasize actions like send, submit, create, login, buy, purchase, learn more, but they are links by definition. Most often, I give the highest priority exactly to buttons, as they are the most attractive and interactive element on the canvas of a website or app. Buttons that convey actions are called call to action. You may see different examples of these on landing pages and sales letters. Please note that you may have more than one style of button on one page. Usually having primary and secondary button is enough. Primary is used for most important links and actions, whereas secondary applies in less valuable cases. Experts play with color coding by creating several different color options for buttons and tracking results, so-called A/B testing or multi-testing. This helps to analyze and define the most efficient option for buttons. When we are on a website and we need to track conversion to increase sales, this could be very, very useful. Okay, in brand books, the color for buttons is the most vibrant. Sometimes it's called accent or additional color. If you don't have one, just try to extract this color from your color palette. In my opinion, the background color of buttons should be defined in accordance with the target audience and overall style of a web interface, and of course, corporate identity. Creating a pink button might be appropriate for a dating website, but it also might be misunderstood on a politician's webpage, for instance. Buttons may also have rounded corners, or so to speak, they have any shape and be longer or shorter, just to be more usable for a visitor. You may also play with the font and length of the line inside the button, but avoid long text on button. Try to be as short as possible, because reading long text on button interferes with the conversion and has less readability. In order to follow logic, try to keep button closer to the related section. Avoid confusion, and if possible, create a frame around a specific area or play with a background color of once. So we should clearly see that this button related to a specific section, or it's a block of text, or it's the end of the form, or it's the top of the web page. In order to have a more effective button, remember that we read from left to right, from top to bottom, and also think about that when you're placing the button. You can't, for instance, you can't put it in the beginning of the form. The form will be submitted only after filling several fields. So it has to be that the button has to be after the end of the section of a form. Okay. Okay, let's turn to mobile specifications. And I would like to start from a font size. And the minimum font size for body text on mobile devices should be 16 pixels. It's defined for Roboto and for Open Sans, as far as I remember. This includes both phones and tablets, otherwise you may end up ignoring text, message, or other important information. So next is an interactive element size. From desktops, we know that the smallest size for elements is 16 to 16 pixels square. This is the dimension of default cursor icon, whereas for mobile, you need to consider the minimal finger hit area, and this is according to the most resources will be 44 pixels to 44 pixels square. Here you may see that the elements are large and easy to press by finger, whereas the search icon has a smaller dimension. It also has a ability to be pressed. Okay. Next is the heat map. For the first sight, it may seem that the layout of mobile UI should follow the left to right, top to bottom rule. For both true and false, if we take into consideration the eye movement map, it may have a diagonal shape pointing from top left to right button, but when it comes to clicks, something weird happens. The case is that when we hold a phone with one hand, it means that only our daddy finger clicks on the screen. So the heat map of clicks looks just the opposite. This is also applicable for tablets, but these are more likely held by two hands. You ask why you need this? Of course, to set your call to action in the right place and let user click on this element with ease. Here you may see different areas of a heat map of screens, iPhone to be precise, and you see that the green area points on natural gesture, so it's not hard for us to use this area. When we see the orange color, it means that we have to make an effort to press on this area, and the red area shows that red color area shows that this is quite hard for a user to press on this. So you may see that without any specific software, you may clean display with a t-shirt from any fingerprints user phone for 20 or 30 minutes and turn off display so you can see your fingerprints. And you will understand which areas are most comfortable to use and most often pressed or touched. Forms in mobile design. Among others, forms have their own requirements. First of all, consider the previous points: heat map, font, and element size. These are the basics that will help you to build a usable form. Secondly, avoid multiple columns in forms. The best practice is to use one input on a single column, and don't forget to place a keyboard placeholder to test whether the visible area is enough for comfortable typing. Dimensions. In the most smartphones, are different, and they should be defined in accordance with the current trends or analytical software if you redesign the website or an app. Ideally, as in the case with desktop designs, you need to prepare your mockup for a set of breakpoints and experience your design on a smaller display, middle, and large. Here you may see the table that has different dimensions of screens that are available these days, and they all are important to consider. Please visit mediag.com for better understanding of different types of dimensions. Okay, here we cover grid. Let's turn a bit back. So as a conclusion for this unit, my suggestion would be to test as much as possible before you push your project to a client or developer. One of my favorite tools is Adobe XD. It's very simple yet useful service that allows to test user experience and other features. You may share your design with your stakeholder, partner, friend, or someone else, and in order to give to receive a feedback. And it's very convenient to give a feedback on Adobe XD. You may use pins for on a specific sections, and so you won't guess for what this feedback is for. Okay. What's about layouts in mobile design? It's quite easy though. I use 12-column grid created by Bootstrap for this and couldn't find a better solution so far. However, I strongly suggest to use a single text block on one column, exactly as in the case with forms. There may be several other elements on the line, just like icons or images and buttons, but the best readability will be achieved when the text is not interfered with anything else. And it also appreciable to have more white space or so-called air on the canvas in order to let the user clearly distinguish multiple sections. Here you have two examples. One is the single column and the other is two-column grid. And you may imagine which one is which option is better. Okay, now we're going back to desktop design at some point, but grids are also applicable for mobile applications and websites. So according to Wikipedia, the grid was borrowed from graphic design in order to let designers organize elements properly. I also believe that the grid contributes to an easier absorption of information displayed. In fact, using grid leads to greater benefits, among which are improving readability and accessibility because it has consistent distinction between elements, better quality of collaboration when two or more designers work on a project, and it also I should mention developers has their own understanding of grid. For instance, Bootstrap grid, consistency and balanced composition, because we have less unused space here. However, in web design, grids appeared not that long ago. Precisely Bootstrap, Zurb Foundation, and Cascade are frameworks that support grid systems. So in web design, using a common grid makes the process of front-end coding easier because Frameworks library already contains tags that divide your page into 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 and 12 columns or more if needed. To decide which one to use depends on the type of the content and your developer's experience with a particular framework. Some people don't use grid at all, and that's not a mistake either. It's not a secret that my favorite framework is Bootstrap, since popular among my partners and clients. In addition, sometimes using this grid makes designing layouts for mobiles unnecessary, since it automatically shrinks or widens the content, adapting to different screen dimensions. Of course, in some cases, I do design for mobile and for for tablet if needed. More than that, working with grids helps you to divide your canvas equally on 2, 3, or more sections, at the same time keeping proper clutter space between sections. You don't have to measure the distance between elements or sections every time. The only thing you need is to stick to guidelines that the system offers. Currently, Bootstrap offers 320 pixels for mobile as a portrait, 480 pixels for mobile landscape, 650 pixels for tablet portrait, and 970 pixels for mobile landscape, plus 1170 and 1560 for desktop canvases. For Retina displays, this size should be doubled. The best practice is to do them all, but we all know the truth. It's very time consuming to create all these layouts, so it really depends on the project you're working on. Okay, let's turn to color scheme or color palettes. Working with brands might be challenging as they want to follow their corporate guidelines through all marketing products, and website or app is not an exception. Therefore, you need to figure out which elements will inherit primary color, secondary, and so on. In such case, I don't have any hardwired rules. All here must come up from harmony and your love to visitors of a website or mobile app. It also happens that a company may have dark color as primary colors, so it may appear that we need a dark background, which is painful for reading text, for instance, or you may want to indicate it the other way. I mean, you may use this dark color in other way. You can't use it as a base color in your interface. I collaborated with many firms that had black colors and main ones. Some of them agreed to avoid overusage of them, some not. All these points are subject for approval, discussion between you and your client. There are many companies that treat brand book as a holy Bible, and you better do as they want. But when things go right, you may divide your draft on several sections and elements, just as we discussed in previous videos: header, footer, content area, buttons, icons, forms, and you also may have some special custom section too. Then start by picking up the main color and applying it to the header background, whether it works or not. If not, try to apply this color to navigation text. Works? Hope it does. Then you may play with the secondary color or continue to apply the primary one to other elements like buttons or icons. If a brand book has a color proportion, try to follow that as well. For instance, if a brand book reads 50% of purple, 30% light blue, and 20% light gray, try to stick these figures to keep the brand image the same and consistent. Go for it and experiment. Okay, choosing a color scheme when you don't have any branding brand identity. It For me, it's more interesting, but there are also some strings attached. There are many scientific approach to color selection and its influence on people. In addition, some research might be done before choosing colors in case your client has no corporate identity yet. So you may need to pick colors to distinguish your client from his or her competitors. Collect most well-known in industry and define the color that is not used yet. It could be a combination of colors or gradients. Treat your color as a transport of emotion and message. If a color attracts too much attention to itself, it might look fun but could be pointless from a business point of view, or painful for eye, for instance. The main goal is to meet business goals with the user's ones, so use color to do it for you. Backgrounds, font color, icons, all should have a color. Not different, but all they are colorful. Do your best, and remember there is no bad color, there are only bad color combinations. In connection with the color palettes, I would like to talk a little about triadic color scheme, which is most useful in the beginning of design career. I used it many years ago. And I suggest you to use this color scheme in the beginning of your design practice, as it's the most functional and easy to learn color scheme. In my view, 3 colors are best fit for most designs, since I may select one color as primary and 2 others for accents. What does it look like? Imagine a color wheel with a triangle inside. Each triangle edge points to a specific color of the spectrum. Whenever a triangle rotates, the hue of all 3 colors changes. That's how triadic scheme works. You will find many color scheme generators online that will help you to define the proper color set. This screenshot is from color.adobe.com/create. You may visit this free website to create your own color scheme using triadic methodology. Okay, now we are turning to fonts, and fonts also need a perfect pair. It's believed that finding a proper font for a project is a high level of professionalism among all designers. This is because the purpose of text is variable. Sometimes it is to attract attention, like in headings. In other cases, it's to deliver precise, serious, sensitive, financial, private, and other information in the text. Younger designers tend to be more outstanding using fancy fonts that often results in a painful reading or even ignoring the content. Back to a good example. We usually need at least 2 font types to connect text blocks or to be distinct from each other. It can be the same font with a different weight, but these from my perspective are overused. Thanks to Google Fonts that allows us to test different font pairs and content in real time. Besides, this has a huge collection of free-to-use fonts ready for your project. My 3 steps of defining the font pair are as follows. What text conveys? Button, link, or content? Thinking about the content type and sense. Does it talk seriously or fun? Past time or real time or future? When I have the answer, I know what style I can use, at least for headings. I visit Google Fonts and select classic, serif, modern, or sans serif mostly, old school for others. And headings are usually bolder than the body text, sometimes capitalized. They're also larger and sometimes double, triple larger than the body text. Body text is usually easy to read or readable. It has a contrast color with the background. Button text could be capitalized and inverted to its background. Then I return to the text body and try to apply the same style for a text block of 100 characters. And I'm sorry, 1000 characters or so. And if it works at the size of 16 pixels, then it's fine. If not, I turn to a more or less traditional typeface. You always can use Open Sans, keeping in mind that the type of content I got from number 2. Now you've learned the most important things about web and mobile user interface design, and now it's time to start creating your own one. I would suggest starting from websites and apps you like. Ask yourself some questions like, why do you like to use it? Why do you use it? Which problems does it solve? How much time do you spend on it? If there are any frustration, how would you solve them? What do you can improve? Hope you find this course interesting and helpful, and I wish you good luck in your design journey.